Hello everybody and welcome to another RCT2 review stream. I know it's been a couple of days, but we're going to jump right back into it with a classic park. This is 15 years old now, hard to believe. But this is Isole Calabria by Turtle and Steve. Turtle has credit for 80% of the park and Steve 20%. It's a great semi-realistic park, pretty classic style, as you can see. It's a Four Corners park with some of the standard type rides you would see back in the day, I suppose. Water coaster, wooden coaster, some kind of B&M, and a corkscrew coaster. But it's got some really great theming, and I think on the whole is a pretty solid looking ride, or a solid looking park. Um, Even after all these years, definitely has the makings of a park from one of these eras or this era. So let's jump in and take a look at all of this stuff. So apparently Peeps can get in here because there is an entrance down here. I haven't actually run this with Peeps, but it would be nice to see them actually use the park. Again, I know I've said this in previous streams, but this is a thing that was pretty common back then, is just you would build the park for the park, not for Peeps or anything like that. So I'm happy that's changed. But come into a really nice little plaza here with some characters. So we have the different folks here, some Peeps already finding their way in. We'll see how many we get by the end of the stream. Some just nice architecture here. This is the Italian area that you first come into. Love this rooftop dining here. You can kind of imagine a great view across of everything. And really liking these just nice little seawall kind of retention walls that you can look out over the landscape. Landscape definitely a strong point on this or for Turtle and for Steve, so you know it was going to be pretty strong. Love this little plaza here with the different types of paving. I think varying your paving types in good looking ways is a learned skill for sure, and it's done well here just to kind of call out accents like this guy and then all these trees around. Helps break up what's kind of an otherwise massive space. I mean, it's still larger than I would suggest building, but it looks good though. I think it looks nice. We have a couple of different bits here. There's a restaurant here. Across the way, we have this like hotel and spa type thing. So here's the sound system. So if we had music going, you'd hear the music there. But nice little kind of cabanas and things up here. And then we have our boats shooting around here. Let's see if we can grab one of these. Speedboat, just zooming through the different areas here. Really like how the plaza is framed with all the architecture around. All the buildings are kind of connected into one big wall, which I know we saw with some other parks we've looked at before, especially from this era. But I think that's nicely done. First ride we get to is the carousel here. A little bit odd that we're blocking the carousel with the little canopy here with the seating area. I would think you'd probably want this more prominently positioned, but you know it's still set up on a block here, so you can at least look out over the space a little bit. And then back over here we have a nice top spin ride. Not really face to the path, perhaps, but looks out over the water, kind of looks across to this side, which I do like. And then you can see some of the neat little queue theming here with the cannons and then the water jets coming out. First coaster is this guy here. So we're doing the usual tropes of the era. So open station, queue that just kind of comes in and then plops up here, and then we're going to hide the entrance and the exit huts because it's just not something that you usually did. So this is Valda Marengo, and I'm sure I'm pronouncing that wrong, but so it goes. So let's let this guy clear the block and we'll take a look. Here we come off of the lift, and a lot of the style of this time too is doing Dragonfire-esque type layouts. from Busch Gardens Williamsburg. This one has, you know, the first sort of dive loop to begin, or the reverse sidewinder, as Arrow would call it. And then the buried loop here, and then these interlocking corkscrews, which is something a little bit odd for Arrow. That's more of a B&M thing. And then we have the little tunnel here into the final brakes. A little bit odd, just in a couple of senses. I mean, you look at the transfer track here; that's like half the size of a train, so obviously couldn't work. And then there's a train stuck in there, peeking out. But we're running 3 trains, which aren't really. I mean, it's got a mid-course, so theoretically, but the final block or the final brakes really aren't sufficient there. So it's kind of a little bit of an oddball thing. I mean, the coaster itself looks good, works around the area, and I mean that's really the key. These types of parks being more semi-realistic than anything else. I mean, you're going for aesthetics overall, pretty much. So I don't feel too bad about seeing that. Over here we've got this a pretty cool custom flat ride. I mean, custom flat rides of the time definitely did not operate. So it's a bit of a shame to see such a cool one sitting there static, but it is neat. This was built by Ritchie, which is noted in the README there. And I do like that all of the buildings, or most all of the buildings, have a sign. So this is Esteban's Pancakes here. Right here you have park information, so you know what that is. And then over here there's Nicolita's little restaurant. I appreciate that there's information about all of the buildings, even if they don't necessarily have stuff in them, like none of this kind of thing, but you can at least get the idea of what's there without without having to go reference a README or something. Like it's well done. So let's continue on to this is Neuchâtel. This is the Swiss themed area according to the README. Not necessarily sure I get Swiss out of it per se, but I do think it's a very pretty area, and it's a pretty interesting coaster. So let's jump right in, since this is the thing that dominates the area. So this is Shorei's Flight, and it's got a pretty substantial drop here into some terrain stuff back here, and then we'll go a little further on. But let's take a watch at this. We're gonna drop off a little pre-drop here into this massive first drop. And we're gonna brace our ribs as we turn here to the right and shoot through there diagonally up underneath the drop, over onto the hillside. Gonna go kind of up and through the trees here, spin around. So we're gonna have this helix, which I always do love this, the left-right drop into the curve there. Go underneath the pathway, up and around into a sort of oddball midsection here with some straight bits, and then the mid-course breaks in the steep drop out of that into a helix, and then we're going to hit brake section 1 before we drop into a helix into brake section 2, and then return. Again, realistic details, sort of oddball. Transfer tracks just not right, and then mid-course really isn't needed even for a ride like this, especially for how late in the ride it is. I'd honestly rather see this kind of speed used over here to do more stuff, more fun stuff, I guess. But I mean, this is pretty bold for a drop right here into this curve. Something nowadays you might see, definitely not something you'd see from older wooden coaster manufacturers or even earlier ones, but that's pretty impressive and certainly dominates the area. It kind of splits the area into a bit of a part here. It's really just a big oval with a couple other bits, but got this nice little bar over here. I do really love these arches and how they go down to the bottom of the water. Always something to keep in mind. Make sure that you go all the way down, which these land tiles do not, so definitely be consistent there, because I think it's a really key thing that increases the believability of your park. This is great though, a little detail there with the risen area that has some seats here, so you can kind of look over and see this coaster just cruise by at a pretty breakneck speed. What is the top speed on this? It is 63 miles per hour, so pretty pretty cruising down that track. So let's take a look. The blue flowers actually, I do think really set off the area well, and they just look nice against the kind of more warm scenery that you're gonna have with the browns and some of these grays here. So over here we have this castle. So this is the Chateau Gellerise, which again, probably pronouncing wrong, but it's got a little mine train ride in here that is a tour, apparently. They're just sort of hidden in here, so you really aren't meant to see this per se, but you can kind of catch it cruising past here. Really love the gate in the water on this side, and then this window and these little makeshift flags. It's sort of stuck in the corner here a little bit awkwardly, which is a shame that it has to almost fall off the map edge, but it's pretty beautiful as far as structure goes, and just looking good in general. All right, so we have a couple more cafes along here, really backed up to the wall, or to the edge of the map, but still not too bad. I do like this little plaza here that's created. It's a little bit strange in that you come into the area and you're faced with this giant coaster, and I would think as a guest you'd kind of go, oh man, that's what I gotta ride. But to ride it, you gotta go all the way past here, past the exit, underneath this, past this ride, past this stuff, all the way around here, into this plaza, and then into the queue line. Maybe this pole plaza would have been better suited for somewhere else, somewhere up here perhaps. But it is kind of neat seeing this go up and over the brake run, this little bridge here. I do like that canopy with the yellow bits and pieces there. So I think that was well done. And then the souvenir shop in front of this just massive fountain at the exit. So that's pretty cool. We do have the scrambler here. Blink and you'd miss it. It kind of blends in a little bit, Aragon. So it would be nice to have that stand out just a little bit, but not too bad. Actually really like this sign on the corner here. The Ye Old Blacksmith Steakhouse on two sides, which is a nice, clever little detail there. So here's Chris the Blacksmith, apparently. Alrighty, so let's move along. So this is the Chinese area. I can't actually remember what it was called at the time. Sorry for moving around. Let's see here. It was Kirishima, that's it. So this is a pretty substantial area, very traditional as to what you would see from themes during this kind of time. So Lotus Flower is our first little coaster we're going to get to, and this is a little kids coaster that works up and around the hillside here. This section of the park is really all about the terrain change, which I appreciate. So definitely cruising through this little area, kind of a little bit of a meandering layout, but not too bad overall, I would say. One of the things that he's done well here is using all the little Chinese and Asian food stalls as architecture. I mean, I know that goes way back, and a lot of people have done that, but it's always just nice to see how well that adds to the scenery, just to give it some extra depth, give it some extra detail, just across for the whole thing. So there's a lot of pretty nice architecture in here, using some trackitecture and the wooden fences here. It's nice because we're not using outwardly Chinese or Asian scenery pieces. I mean, definitely using the shops and everything, but really conveying the look of the Asian stuff without the need for those roofs. Definitely using the walls to advantage, and then also having just a lot of these just stalls and everything in here. But I think the plazas and things created here are nice. We have the pink of the flowers, and then also of the cherry blossom trees. Creates a nice plaza. It's a little bit hard to work your way through here since the pathway sort of blends into some of the other things, so it's kind of hard to see which way you're going through here. But you kind of have this main path that passes through this side, and then you cross into this plaza, which is the entrance to the ride here. The ride being Kumaji River Spirit. I really do like that among his rides. I think the way that he throws a plaza in there just in front of the attraction itself is a really great way to do rides. When we looked at Ancient Wonders by Alex, we saw him do something similar. He really set up all the rides to be, you know, something. So it's not just uh, a queue line that just comes off of the side of the building or the side of the pathway. So this is really well done in my opinion. I think that's strong. Pretty nice station here. Again, another open air station, as was the style at the time. And you can see some of the other little shops here. There's the on-ride photos. There's the restrooms. Here's the souvenir stalls. While we're waiting for a boat to get back, let's go look up here. So we have just a pathway that works all the way up in this side. So this is the Peony Pavilion, which is beautiful architecture. Actually, I really like the wall here, just with the texture, and then here we have Madame May's House of Plants. So we have this sort of hanging gardens thing going on. These little buttress type structures that frame this lift hill here, and then really just liking this nature walk of sorts out over, well, the nothingness, this huge cliff kind of coming down. Then lots of just things up here. We got a couple of pandas, giant panda. But I like that these buildings sort of work their way up the side of the architecture, or of the landscape of the mountainside, just to really get everything into scale a little bit. I think it helps and kind of makes everything blend pretty well. Let's see where we are as far as this goes. One of the challenges of water rides, among other things, I would say, is that they're really long, because they just take so long to traverse at 2 miles per hour. This ride itself is 5 minutes and 15 seconds, which is pretty substantial. But I think we are almost back, which we are. We're not going to watch the whole thing, but let's speed up time just a little bit here and take a look. All right, here we go for our coaster trip. A really nice little start. I love this just kind of right left turn here through the tunnel and into lift number 1. Up here's the Panghuan Temple, sort of crumbling over to the side. I feel like every park of this time had to have a crumbling archway of some sort. A little drop beyond the rice fields here into this first splash by these pretty nice waterfalls. They're a little monotonous, and then you have things like that kind of throw it off, but on the whole, looks pretty nice. But then we're going to drop down again onto some coaster track, have a little sort of slow section. Back the scenery here. And then we'll splash down into this section here, which continues along and actually has a drop inside, which you can't even see, unfortunately, that gets you down to sort of this lowest elevation. Let's take a look again with the invisibility. Drops down into this kind of lower pool and then actually wraps around and goes through the waterfall itself before engaging a couple of different lift hills. Let's speed up again. There we go. 1, 2, 3 lift hills and 4 lift hills here in a second, until we head up to the top. So we're definitely not skimping on our maintenance bills. This is a pretty substantial ride. And then we'll come to this upper section of water, and then we'll do one more little up to our large drop at the end. As I've said many times, saving the best drop until the end is key on a ride like this. You really don't want to waste it early. You want to build up to something. So this is doing just that. You have this great build up through this kind of adventure ride, through this whole beautiful area and landscaping and everything. Drop down through this landscape tunnel. You have the water splash on either side, and then you have this nice long cool down section before you get pulled back up into the station. Lots of great details through here. I love the lanterns on the side of the pathway, and honestly just the color. Asian areas tend to get very red very quickly, especially this dark red. Asian and pirate areas both tend to overuse this dark red, but using the greens I think help. This green is never my first choice. It's a little too saturated for my taste, but I actually kind of like it here. I think it's done pretty well. And then the blue is sprinkled in here with some of the yellows and then also the pink. and the magenta. So that all of that combined with the greenery of the landscaping really adds some color diversity to the space, and honestly, it just looked really nice. I think was done well for sure. All right, so what else do we have here? So here's Shinpo's Emporium, just a nice little shop on this side. Here's a 3D show, Studio Max Spirited Away. It's always a good choice when it comes to Ghibli films. This pathway would never have been my favorite, but I recall using it all the time back then, just for whatever reason. I just really like the look of it. All right, so let's transition one more time here into Molas, which is the Spanish area, and this one was largely built by Steve, according to the README. So let's take a look and try not to give him too hard of a time. So we have a Space Rings ride here, which is something you actually don't usually see. Usually you're kind of grasping to put one of these in, just since it's not a common ride, and it's not something you usually see at parks anyway, but really like how this coaster is framed from both sides as you come in. You come in this way and you have the sign for the entrance to the area with the giant loop behind that has this nice little threaded piece of track going through, and you come in on this side and you're catching this drop over the water, and with this waterfall coming down, just really nicely placed overall. And just as you're coming across this bridge, you can see this whole lift hill looming to the side. It's just really well done as far as positioning goes. So let's take a look here. So this is Sole Stallo. This is a B&M of sorts with a nice little curving drop here into the full drop. Nice little landscape bit there. So loop, and then we come back through and thread it. Pretty natural threading, so which is nice. Sometimes that can feel really forced. And then we have our dive loop here underneath into our roll. I'm not quite sure why these aren't banked on either side. I would have gone for the banking there. But then we drop around and come back up into a little too short mid-course, which is maybe a little unnecessary, but we have our double cork here with the interlocking corks more so before we come back and into the station itself. No transfer track, but that's all right. So we have two trains in general. I like it. I think it's a nice looking ride. Kind of falls apart towards the end. This is not my favorite, but this a little bit here, at least up until we curve back under the drop. This is really solid, a really nice look, and just works well around the landscaping. And the thing that I'd point out here especially is that landscape doesn't have to be full to look good. These are pretty much all blank dirt tiles and just look really nice. Same with back here, same with all along here. It's really sparse in some of the areas, and I think that's key, is you can't overload these kind of landscapes, because then it just becomes too much. So here we have a little water ride here, and this is actually kind of opposite of what I would have said for the water coaster. This one gets the drop out of the way right away, which is not something I would suggest. Honestly, in my opinion, this ride would be better almost swapped the other way. You run it through here, lift up, and then you drop down by the pathway. Because as it sits right now, only these couple of people who are dining here are going to see this splash at all. So kind of a little bit of an odd choice, I would say, for a ride that sits in here. Almost it's a filler ride of sorts. We do have a little car ride here. This is an Explorer ride. Underground little station here, and then just some track through some nice little landscaping, couple of tunnels, and I kind of like these little cave houses that it alludes to with the windows on all the all the dirt wall pieces here. Nice looking little ride. I do appreciate adventure rides of this type. I just think it's something that you do see on a lot of parks, and you don't really see much in the game, so it's nice to see a little bit of variety there and let you do, some fun stuff that's custom designed, that's not just a roller coaster. I think you're always looking for that, because it can so easily get into a coaster, a collection of flat rides, and architecture. So it's nice to see something that's not that. Nice support work. It's kind of the old school supports. A little bit too many here, probably twice to 3 times as many as you need, but again, that was sort of the standard way you did it at the time. I do like the variation of underneath the water here, just so it's not, one tile down and then just totally smooth. It's got a lot more variation than you might see typically, but I don't dislike it. I think it's pretty nice. I'm a fan of that. It works really well, but as we zoom out and kind of look at this whole thing, I think the overall layout is good. It's definitely the standard Four Corners Park that became a thing on New Element, but it's done pretty well. You can simplify out the pathway layout pretty well. You have a loop, you have this sort of curvy pass through here, and then another loop on this one. So it's all pretty straightforward, pretty easy to navigate, and done well. And I like that they all have room to breathe, and they're not on top of each other, and they're all very distinctive. Even backed out here, you can pretty easily see, well, this is Asian, this is probably some kind of Italian. This one isn't readily apparent out here, nor is this one, but once you get in, you can definitely see those little bits. But I mean, on the whole, I like the look a lot. This was a Spotlight winner, and it was pretty well regarded, and honestly, it still should be well regarded. For 15 years, this holds up shockingly well. I think it's a really, really nice looking park. Definitely solidly in the semi-realistic. There's a lot of realistic details that are missed here, but honestly, he wasn't going for that, and you can't fault it because of it. So well done to Turtle and to Steve. I think they did a very nice job on the park. So hopefully you guys will download this one and take a look. Like I said, it's a definite classic here, 15 years old, potentially older than some of the newer players that we're seeing here. So it's we're definitely showing our age in this community now, but that's a good thing. So that's it for this one. We will be back with more soon. Stay tuned for an announcement tomorrow, just as a sneak peek. On Saturday, this coming Saturday, July 18th, we are going to be doing a live stream Coaster College session. So what I'm calling Andrelzic's Amusement Academy. We're going to be teaching you how to build realistic coasters in RCT. So if it's something you've struggled with, or you just want to know more about how real-life coasters translate into the game, join in. I think it's going to be a fun, hopefully informational and interactive session. I'm hoping for a lot of viewers so we can get a lot of different questions and things like that, and maybe you'll go away having learned a thing or two. So anyway, thank you very much for watching, and I will see you in the next one. Have a good night.